Hello, and thank you to all you wonderfully resilient folks that are able to sit this long in a day. That you've been a terrific audience, and I realize that this is really stretching everybody's ability to sit still when you're all such active people. So thank you for giving me your attention. I've been asked to talk about capacity building. And when I was first asked, I thought, it would probably be more interesting to talk about the life cycle of a jellyfish or something, because it's just so much in our common language now. But it's only really been in my language. I've worked for a long time in the social service sector, and I've only had the position I have now for over 2 years. I started near the beginning of 2010 with an organization in Waterloo called Capacity Waterloo Region. And when I learned about this position and they told me what they were looking for, I thought, like in Waterloo, we sort of think we're the center of the universe, and all great ideas come out of Waterloo. So I thought that some of our community leaders had really invented this new concept of capacity building, and they came to me because I was the most innovative person in town and could come up with a way to take it to world prominence. Well, I wasn't very long in the position till I learned that capacity building is absolutely everyday language around the world, and it's somewhat of a movement, I guess, that has been around for about 20 years, that it has been in the language. And around the same period, social innovation became the language of the day. And, social innovation has been in the literature and in activities around the world for also about 25 years. And there is, I had wondered, I was glad that I was following Cheryl, because I wondered how her presentation might differ from mine, because social innovation and capacity building are just so intertwined. But I think you will see, that they're totally connected, and I think sometimes the words are even interchangeable, at least in my mind. But they are coming from very different areas of practice in terms of trying to understand the concepts behind both capacity building and social innovation. So I'm going to try and let you know what I've learned about capacity building. Now, a lot of it I learned before I knew the language of capacity building, that there isn't really, it's hard, it's like we see things, we pull together different sets of ideas, but everything that, the elements of capacity building have so much been a part of our practice of trying to do social good and change the world for centuries. So when I tried to think of a neat topic or a title for my capacity building, it seemed to me that this is all about realizing that as a nonprofit sector, we're moving beyond Robin Hood. And that, I hope, will make more sense as I go along. But when we look back throughout history, that societies have continuously sought creative ways and innovative ways to address serious and complex social issues. That just again, throughout history, we see how before institutions came into place, that people of goodwill have always banded together to help those who are suffering from the whole range of social and emotional and health kinds of issues. We didn't always do it in a really humane way. That religious institutions, I think, have some of religions of all types throughout the world, have had a long history of trying to address the needs of the poor, the suffering, social kinds of needs. They've done it with varying degrees of success and not always in the most humane ways possible by today's standards. I think when we look back in the 15th and 16th centuries in Western Europe and see when lower levels of government began to get involved in trying to address social issues that, you know, there was a mean-spirited and cruel kind of component to it. Probably best known to us from, you know, the times of Charles Dickens and the writings of Charles Dickens, where the English Poor Laws, where people would be publicly flogged for being poor, and the treatment in the workhouses and poor houses of the day were very harsh and strict, to say the least. Those have continued into, you know, the last, maybe up until even the 1950s in Canada, when, you know, before we had things like some of our universal social benefits, like the old age pension. I mean, if you ask your, I'm looking at the ages of people in the room, for some of you, your grandparents, for lots of you, your great-grandparents, but about where grandma, you know, after she couldn't farm anymore and, you know, sat behind the kitchen stove because she had no means of supporting herself, and we still had, I mean, many of today's seniors, in the older seniors, still remember the old age homes as the poor houses. I mean, they were the city owned, and they certainly were not known for humanely treating people, but again, a fairly cold way of trying to make sure that people's basic needs were met. I put that a little bit into history to say, you know, what a change we really have today, because, you know, for a long time, working for social good was on the margins of society. When I studied social work, this is hard to believe, but when I studied social work, there were no books. The word child abuse was not in our vocabulary in Canada. Domestic violence, wife assault, I mean, the child abuse words only began to come into our vocabulary in the 60s. The legislation around, there were child welfare agencies, but they were really based more around taking care of children who were abandoned or neglected, and that very much based around parents' rights. The idea of the best interests of the child is only a concept from the 60s that has reshaped the way we look at all our child welfare. It was only in the 70s that we even had language we were able to talk about domestic violence or any kind of violence in the home, that without that language, people knew it wasn't that the problems didn't exist. The problems have always existed in terms of how people treat each other and the abusive ways in which people treat each other, but it was very much behind closed doors and a secret that remained in the family, that as a society, we didn't have the capability to deal with it whatsoever. Today, you know, I mean, this sort of idea of working for social good has moved way, you know, it's moved way into the inner circle, and that we keep talking about removing the silos, but the whole idea that it's only a certain group of people that have responsibility for social good or environmental good it's just no longer holds true. So when we talk about, you know, building capacity, and we talk about it within building capacity within nonprofits, I think we have to really remember that we do not have the corner on the helping market, that our communities are full of good people who really share our concerns for the whole range of social and emotional and health kinds of problems. And that where you see that now is where, you know, some of our smartest and most talented young people in all kinds of areas of science, technology, their goal is changing the world. I was at a wonderful event. Microsoft sponsors annually a World Cup event where teams of university students from across the world actually enter this event. And the whole goal, the team has to have a technology solution to a world problem. So they're save the world kinds of issues. And in Canada, there were 700 teams from across Canada that entered into, from all various universities that entered the contest. And the 7 finalists did a kind of a runoff, I guess you call it, at University of Waterloo a few weeks ago, and I was able to attend that. And these of the 7, one team was chosen to represent Canadian students in Australia, which is where the World Cup is being held in September. But all of their technology solutions were geared towards major social problems. They had some incredibly brilliant solutions to addressing poverty, world hunger, kind of green things, environmental things, that were just like behind them, what came across was that word we've heard a lot today. Behind all the ideas, what came across was the passion. And for me, what was really interesting was these would be all like 20, 22-year-olds. They had no concept whatsoever as to whether they had a for-profit or a non-profit solution. Like, it simply didn't matter. What mattered was they were totally invested in coming up with something to change the world.